Welcome back, everybody, to an extremely special podcast this time. This has been in the works for a while now. We have a very special guest, clearly. We'll get into that in a second. Before we do, Marc and I have a few announcements to make. Marc has a Palm Street. You're doing a Palm Street today, Marc? This afternoon?
Palm Street tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
8 p.m. tonight, fellas. 8 p.m. tonight. This episode will not be live at that time, but we will have a Reels out. What was that?
We're giving away two Monster Box enclosures
Two Monster
tonight.
Box enclosures. Another point. Guys, if you haven't checked them out already, man, head over to monsterbox.us, man. We're running some cool holiday sales. We have some super cool projects in the works. We're not claiming to be the best enclosures on the market, but we are the most affordable. And we're by far the cheapest. We offer an incredible product, very pocket friendly, aesthetically pleasing. And these enclosures were made collectively with 3 or 4 guys that have been dealing with reptiles our whole lives. Again, these aren't your top of the line crazy paludariums. These are enclosures for everyday people that probably have more than one animal. Again, check them out. Check out our IG page, Monster Box Instagram page, Monster Box Enclosures. Check out our website, monsterbox.us, and subscribe to our mailing list on there, man. That's how you're going to find out about any coupons we put out, giveaways, raffles, promotions, events we're involved in. Check it out, guys. Follow us there and sign up for the mailing list on monsterbox.us. And follow the Instagram page. We run a giveaway a month. We're giving away an enclosure a month. Really, two enclosures a month. But check it out. And without any further ado, guys, I want to introduce to you Mr. Thomas Marriott from EK Magazine, Blue River Diets. He's everywhere. He's everywhere doing everything. Doing incredible things for this hobby, man. Traveling the globe to get us information for our hobbies, our passion, our animals. These animals that we know nothing more than their lives in these boxes that we give them. Thomas is traveling the globe, exploring habitats, seeking out answers, and we have him here today, guys. I mean, how much cooler does this get? He was literally in New Caledonia. Now he's here. All right, so Thomas, for anyone that doesn't know you, can you just give us a quick introduction to who you are, what you do, why you do it?
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me back on the podcast, Anthony, and thanks, Marc. So what I do is basically, what I'm doing now has sort of changed a little bit from the last time we spoke. So initially, I was the sort of editor of Exotics Keeper magazine, so that started around over 4 years ago now, and we were producing this magazine for quite a few years. A lot of it was speaking to people, articles, and producing this monthly magazine that was mostly focused in the UK. And then we've basically, in the last sort of couple of years, shifted our attention to more digital stuff, social media, online kind of open access to really reach as many people as possible. And in doing so, it's sort of allowed us to go and do some really interesting stuff. So I've always been quite a keen kind of traveller. When I was working on the magazine, I was doing quite long trips and moving around and working from abroad and trying to get those stories and share those stories from in situ. Now we're actually focusing more on our own kind of research, really, and partnering with brands that can fund these kind of things. So probably the most well-known was the Blue River Diets collaboration, where we went over to New Caledonia for about 3 weeks last year in the wet season, and went out to find crested geckos, different New Caledonian geckos, and learn a little bit more about them in the wild, but actually to publish it on sort of social media and really get that information out there. And then more recently, we returned to New Caledonia to basically do a comparison. So first time it was the wet season, this time was the dry season. Very few people have actually gone out there and done that. I know there's quite a few personalities that have gone out to New Caledonia and found these geckos in the wild, but I don't think, as far as I'm aware, anybody in the sort of social media world anyway has actually done this comparison of wet and dry.
Yeah.
And we found out some really interesting stuff. So we also managed to tag on, like I went on holiday to Australia for a little while and found bearded dragons over like a week and went out into the habitat. And it wasn't maybe as comprehensive as our crested gecko stuff, but just showing people what the habitat looks like, the way when these animals are active, how they're engaging with their environment, and also like activity levels. So throughout the year, there's definitely like a bearded dragon season out there, and then we learn loads of stuff, but really it's sort of bridging the gap between that captive husbandry and that wild observations, so that people just have a little bit more context with their animals. It opens new discussions, it inspires people to think maybe more creatively with their terrariums and their setups, and it's all doing really well. We've had some very kind words and feedback from it, and hope to keep this ball rolling and find many more species out in the wild.
It's huge, man. It's huge. I like you mentioned. I mean, there's been some people, I'm sure, in the scientific world that have compared seasons, but you'd have to really, really dig into some, scientific papers and stuff to find that information. But as far as like in the new world, right, like with a social media aspect, you are absolutely the only person that's done it. Comparing the two seasons. Other people have clearly went and explore the island, if you will, but it's to the degree that you have. No, you've absolutely crushed it, dude. Crushed it, doing it the best. We're getting pretty laggy over here.
Cheers.
I'm sure the software will fix this.
I
But
mean,
you've been doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think there's a little bit of lag and a little bit of feedback in the audio. That might be me.
I'm in for a snowstorm, man. It kind of stinks, but we're supposed to get 6 to 8 inches of snow popped up out of nowhere. This storm from Canada. Thanks, Canada, blowing this damn thing down here.
Nice.
But the software,
right,
the software does a pretty good job of stitching it together. So if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. But it's just best to just keep rolling it, and it usually works out. Mark, do you have questions about anything that we talked about so far? I know I could be an earful, man, so just cut me off and shut me up. Before we don't get into the details, think of it. Don't start. We ain't going to dig into
No. I'm ready to go. But really, really and truly, I find it super interesting what you're doing, Thomas. Maybe to start it off, what goes into planning a trip like this? How much time in advance do you take?
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, with something like New Caledonia, it's quite labour intensive, I guess, or time intensive anyway, because there isn't really any kind of herping network out there. The socio sort of political aspects out there. I mean, that tourism is obviously a huge point of like where a lot of the sort of revenue comes from. I think it accounts for something like 8% of New Caledonia's GDP or something like that. So tourism is huge, but like herping really isn't. And all the geckos are obviously sadly targeted by poachers. So there is a huge amount of enforcement from sort of officials at the kind of airport level. But there's like a grey area around the geckos sort of generally. So you've not got a lot of people setting up. At one point we were told it was illegal to even photograph the geckos. I think that was a bit of a bluff from the gendarme out there. But then other people, and then other people will say, that you can, like the park rangers in Blue River will say, this is the perfect place to go to them. We can show it. So it's a massive. It's kind of like their New Caledonia's kind of treasure that they don't want to talk about too much. So in terms of finding local guides, it's really difficult. So you have to sort of do it yourself. But getting around, and it really isn't too hard. It's expensive to get out there, and obviously long flights and very limited kind of flight paths too. So you really need to speak to other herpetologists that have been out there and have spots and locations, and you can go out and you can learn a little bit more. And we were very lucky to have some information from Philip de Bochelet about where those first geckos came from. So, the first time we went out there, obviously I wanted to see a gecko, but it was like, let's just capture this, let's photograph everything, let's film everything, and just build that connect between keepers and the in situ environment. But actually, finding them once you sort of know what you're looking for becomes relatively straightforward. The populations aren't great; they're not like other species of gecko where you find peaks. They're not like tokays in Southeast Asia or something like that. You know, they are few and far between, but the right locations.
Not like they are in captivity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if all the captive geckos are out on the Isle of Pines, I think you'd be tripping over them. I think the actual Isle of Pines is only just over 50 miles squared, and has a population. The last figures that I found were 2,000, but I don't think that's really true anymore. I think since COVID, a lot of people that are working maybe on the island and stuff have probably gone back to mainland.
Wow.
But I'm not sure. Obviously, there's a handful of hotels on the Isle of Pines. One of them was closed down this latest time, and the two other ones are basically were empty. So I think COVID had a real impact, and obviously there was some riots as well that got quite violent shortly after after we left from the last one. So I don't think it's done the tourism industry a lot of favours, to be honest. So it would be really nice to see people actually set up like herping, or tours or something, because there's a lot of interest. But in terms of having that government kind of conversation and having it all authorised and actually having people come over and do it, it's always going to be complicated. But it takes a lot of planning and speaking to people and just time out in the field as well. You can't really let a second go by. We spent all day photographing environments, taking environmental readings every hour through the day to see what that fluctuation looks like. But then, certainly on this last expedition, most of the geckos aren't active until a couple of hours after dusk. And then so you want to stay out until sort of 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you're up at 5 taking readings again. Still takes its toll. I mean, it's a beautiful place, but it's not necessarily, it's not easy. It's not like you can just hit somebody up and say, we'd like to do a 2-week trip. Can you point us in the right direction of this species, for example? Takes a bit more planning.
And
it's impressive. Makes it even more impressive just listening to it. I'm a big advocate on the only thing that stops us in life from doing 90% of things is ourselves, right? Like, we are our biggest hurdles. And to see someone that can acknowledge those hurdles, if you will, to go over there and you still found a way is like super inspirational. It really, really is. It just goes to show, because there's so many rumors, right? Like, people say you have to get permission from the tribal leaders, and all these things that I don't want to say aren't true, but you've kind of shown us multiple times now that there is still a way. If there is a true passion and a desire to get there, it can still be done. You can still get your feet on the ground, and these crested geckos, any chihuahuas, lychees, you can get your feet on the ground over there if you really were determined. And that speaks volumes about who you are and real life in general, if you're being honest. That we
I think, and it's funny, like, we had, at one point, I actually had somebody message me who was there. I think she was on a honeymoon, and actually said, I really want to see a lychee. I'm on the Isle of Pines right now. Do you know where to go? What to do? And I'm always, it sounds probably a bit hypocritical now, but I try not to give away too many spots. But I sort of said, you're in the right place. I'm sure you're looking. They're usually this far up in the trees. They're usually, this sort of. And I think she ended up finding them. But it's not unusual, but especially for like Aussies. I think she was an Aussie, people from New Zealand and stuff, and they know a lot of the time they're used to these very strict rules as well around where you can and can't go. And like you were saying with this kind of tribal leaders and stuff, we found this trip there was less animosity, I think, towards tourists. Like, when we first went over there, we were warned by hotel staff, don't go out at night and don't go to this and that. So we found a gecko during the day very early on, and we just kept our search quite close to where we were staying. So it was, all good. But this last trip, we actually found ourselves, as we were driving around the island, actually stopping, getting out, speaking to people. If we knew that do you see these geckos here? Do you know of them? a lot of the time people know about the leeches, but on the Isle of Pines, a few people actually knew about the crested geckos as well, which was encouraging. Yeah, whereas like last time we just wasn't having that dialogue quite as much. Whereas this time, if there was somebody out in their garden close to the habitat we'd be walking, we'd just make ourselves known and speak to as many people as possible. And it came back with, some interesting conversations, and it also made us feel a little bit more secure when we were walking down trails and stuff at night, which is good. I think there's definitely, you can maybe hammer up a little bit about the kind of private permissions and this kind of thing, but actually just being forthcoming and being polite and friendly with people is key, and a lot of these sort of trails go adjacent to people's lands, and if they know you're there, a lot of the time they'll be quite friendly.
What language do they speak, just out of curiosity? What's their native language in New Caledonia?
So it's like Kanak, but there's 8 different Kanak languages. So it's the same language that's spoken on Isle of Pines as the southern half of Frontier.
Islands speak different languages.
Yeah, so there's 8 different indigenous languages. Whether there's a more universal one that everybody speaks, I'm not sure. But in terms of actual breakdown of tribal kind of geographics, yeah, there's actually quite a few. And obviously,
have you picked up on the language?
Yeah, I was just saying, how are you communicating?
Not. No, so obviously people speak French more so than anything.
Oh,
it's a French territory. So I did pick up a little bit of French, but no Kanak.
Cool.
That's freaking cool, man. I didn't know that. That makes sense, but it's interesting that the islands have these different little diverse versions of a language, that's kind of like Samoan style, Polynesia type thing. That's very cool.
Even like the culture as well, like the way that reptiles are generally perceived changes across the island. So in some cultures, lizards are seen as like harbingers of death, and they take you into the afterworld and that sort of thing. And then in other cultures, they're actually seen as like the first life form. So there's like a story that basically the creation of the earth was the moon basically bit onto a rock and left its teeth, and the teeth that fell into the sea became sea snakes, and the ones that stayed on the rock were lizards, and they were the first sort of living beings on earth. But then I think you go further north, and it's like lizards are like bad omens, and leeches can suck your soul out, and all this kind of stuff. So very diverse, considering it's a relatively small island. Very diverse kind of cultural background.
Very cool. Very, very cool. So who they have their own government? Who runs New Caledonia? Who would be like their controlling government? Who's their money? Like their money, their currency. Can you explain a little of that stuff to us, just so people have a better understanding of the area, the country as a whole?
Yeah, sure. So they use the Pacific franc, which I think quite a few French territories in the Pacific still use. And it's beautiful money. The notes are incredible. They've got no geckos on them, but they have got Cargu, they have got Nautilus as well. And then it falls under the sort of French government for sort of overall control. But there's a South Province government and a North Province government. So everywhere sort of, I guess, south of the Blue River Provincial Park and the Isle of Pines falls under one authority, and then north of that falls under another authority. And I think I don't know enough to really comment, but I would imagine because most of the sort of European heritage people in New Caledonia typically live in the south, it might be to sort of give a little bit more agency over more indigenous people further north. But I don't know. I might be being completely out of turn there. But, it would make sense when you look at the sort of distribution of people over the island.
Interesting. What's the exchange rate? Like, how much is
It's complicated.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's like I can't remember now, but it's in the thousands of francs. Is maybe £10 or something. I can't remember, but it was. Yeah, it's not easy to keep up with, but
that's what I'm so curious about. How did you adapt to that?
Yeah,
the basic stuff when you're not in the woods.
Yeah, and like this is like the actual cities and stuff are beautiful. Like New Caledonia, and it's really well developed. You know, it's the infrastructure is really good. You know, it's not difficult. The Isle of Pines, it's very difficult to get any kind of signal or Wi-Fi. Hence our issues with trying to get this.
Yeah, I remember we were supposed to try to do a live from over there. You know, we were gonna hop on camera. That didn't work out well.
Yeah, well, I think it was. I mean, even like obviously, I was filling up loads and loads of footage and stuff, and relying on my iCloud to sort of back up and then film more stuff, and it just didn't. So we were like filling up our entire. I deleted every single app on my phone. Filled up obviously the camera, SD cards and stuff. It was crazy, but the first time the Wi-Fi was pretty good. So I don't know what changed there, but on Grand Terre, like you know, all the roads are really good. You know, we hired a camper van, we're driving around. You know, it's not, even though it's quite a remote place, it's not difficult to get around. But yeah, the sort of everything's really expensive too. So for me, I'm obviously blessed to have a company that sort of paid for the trip and everything. The thought of trying to do it by myself, well, it would be difficult. You then realise the amount of dedication of some of those first herpetologists that were out there and exporting stuff and doing multiple trips a year, because it's nuts. Absolutely nuts. Like thousands and thousands of pounds.
I bet everything. I mean, I'm sure they have some exports, but if you think about it, as an island nation, everything has to come in. It's like already you're doubling, damn near doubling the price of everything that has to come in, and you know, limited quantities of everything. I mean, it just sounds expensive, you know, like
yeah. And even like, I mean, London, try and buy a pint of beer in London, you know, that's already pretty pricey. But you know, your most basic beer in like a sort of roadside cafe in New Caledonia is more than that. You know, it's crazy.
Jeez. All right, well, let's get into some animals here. Mark, why don't you set it off, man? Set the tone, Mark. Let me see where your head's at today, brother. You still thinking mountain bikes, gravel bikes, or are you thinking New Caledonia bikes?
well, to set it off, there's so much information that I want to ask, but I know in a trip like this, from what I understand, this is your second trip, right? This trip, what was the most wow moments that you had, like that, you know, really hit home? What was that special thing?
Yeah.
And then what was the worst moments?
I don't even have to think about this, right? So, I mean, anyone that's been following EK or Blue River or whatever will probably have seen this video. But the best thing, we were out one night just walking down one of the trails. We'd already been quite successful. That night, we saw a chahoua really early, first chahoua of the trip. We were like, that's really, really cool. It was too high up to really, you know, get any decent photos, but you could tell what it was. And we were like, right, nice. But then I was a little bit disappointed that I couldn't get a nice photo of them, you know? So, but carried on walking. I was like, well, it's still pretty cool. And then sat down for a bit, because we'd been out for a couple of hours by that point, just to have a drink. And then I heard this thud, right? And I thought it was like a coconut. Like it was, and to be fair, it could have still been a coconut, right? But it was like, boom, and it sort of caught my attention. So I turned around and then see a bit of eye shine coming back at me. And you see there's heaps of rats out there, right? There's like, you know, all over the place. And so you could, a mammal eye shine actually looks just like a leechy eye shine. And I looked at it and it was like, but it was big. And I was like, that's weird, on the floor. And then, so I walked over and my girlfriend's behind me. And we started walking over and I was like, it's a fucking leech.
That's awesome.
But you might have to bleep that out. I was blown away. I was like, crazy, you know?
Awesome.
And she was like, what's going on? Like, I was like, it's a leechy. She was like, well, what? And it had either fallen out the tree and it was in shock because it didn't move. Like, it just sat there, which meant got some lovely photos. We'd seen a couple of leechies the nights before, way up in the tree. And I was like, just blown away by it. You know, we managed to get a really cool video with it. No, I didn't touch it at all. It just sat there lovely for us. And then as I stood up, I think it sort of looked up and went, okay, you've had your fun, and wandered off and went straight back up the tree again. And
I've shared that picture probably 100 times already. That's that one picture of that one lychee already debunks so much stuff. When you talk about the hobby and the reptile hobby and trade, people swear they can, not everybody, but they can identify a locality, a lychee, by the way it looks. When you look at a Pine Island Leachianus in captivity, nothing like Leachianus found on the floor of New Caledonia, So I've been sharing that picture like, oh, you guys think you know everything, and look at this. This is a Leachianus from New Caledonia, Pine Island, right here in your face. All that, because in captivity they typically are, high patterned animal, a lot of white bars, super things, but those are just things that we have bred for, out of those localities. When you look at a wild specimen, completely different.
Absolutely,
looks much more GT-ish, what the hobby considers, the look in the hobby for a GT specimen. It's it was just, I don't even know how to explain it. From a keeper, locale-eccentric person, it was a mind-blowing thing to see,
And I think that's the thing. I mean, lychees obviously were collected legally back in the sort of 70s and 80s and that kind of thing, and they were all for scientific expeditions, and so a lot of that locality data would have been kept. But when you think multiple generations down the line, and probably some people maybe not being quite as honest with their localities, like,
absolutely,
they're very easily mixed. And also, animals are variable. Even within the same locality, you get a lot of variation. And like Dave Kaufman's recent film on the leeches, it's absolutely incredible stuff. Like I thought it was really interesting, and we did manage to get over to Bros. We didn't have enough time really we didn't find any leeches over there. But I found that really interesting because he's doing these comparisons, but it's in captivity, it's not quite as black and white. Very difficult to identify animals by sight.
I have one question that's not necessarily selfish, but I'm going to ask it for the viewers. And I think I know the answer, and you briefly touched on it. What exactly was the point of this second trip? Like, I know to see the wet, they can compare the two seasons, but what exactly were you looking for in between the two seasons? What were you really interested in seeing? What was your main punch list of things to see this time around?
So there was a few things. I guess the abundance of fruit, whether there were different types of fruit and prey, and how that sort of changes. Also, obviously, like temperature and humidity and that kind of thing. The climatic data that we get from New Caledonia doesn't necessarily correlate with the in situ habitat data that we were getting from the last expedition. So we thought it's quite important to go out there and get that data again, even if it is for a short sort of snapshot. And also just getting more sightings, really. We found probably the most interesting thing of that first trip was finding that gecko out during the day. And that you can't really plan for that, So just spending more time in the habitat and seeing whether that was a pattern that actually held up. Since coming back, we've noticed huge differences in humidity, very little difference in temperature, big differences in seasonal kind of abundance of prey and live food. The species diversity as well. We were finding 2 or 3 bovia and 2 or 3 nactus geckos out every night in wet season. We didn't see one on this expedition.
Interesting.
Likewise, on the first expedition, we didn't find any chahua or leeches, and we found like a solid handful of them on this latest one. That's kind of interesting. Again, you might be looking in the wrong places or whatever, but we found it quite interesting. And then, just sort of inferring what that sort of looks like in captivity, because seasonal shift is not that difficult to replicate. And even though the geckos are super hardy and they breed well year round, and you can keep them relatively static year round, and but can we do a little bit better? Like, is there some very easy tweaks that we can make to improve their husbandry and perhaps see some slightly more natural behaviours? And I think that's it. It's none of this stuff is a matter of life or death, you know. But with the bearded dragon stuff, somebody's not giving enough UV or they're not giving enough temperatures. There's huge, like medical implications for the animal.
Sure.
But with these geckos, it's more about getting things right. Trying to give Blue River some sort of in situ research to really refine their formulas, understand whether there's any fruits that can be implemented that are more natural. Is there a sort of diet plan that they can be implementing? Is there, you know, so much stuff? But yeah, so
I love that Blue River's doing that. You know, that's amazing. If you think about it, Mark, of all these other diets out there that claim to make the best diet for the hobby, I mean, how many of them have actually, and I get it, there's been guys from all of those camps, you know, these big name food companies that go over there. It just seems to me that Blue River's doing a lot more, you know, to get this right, instead of just saying, I've been to New Caledonia, I've checked it out, here's our diet. You know, they're going over there with intention of you know, of gathering this information and details to literally provide the best meal and meal supplementation for these animals as possible. I think that speaks volumes.
Not only food, but environment and care tips.
Sure.
You know.
Well, yeah.
Everything.
Sure.
But yeah, if there was one thing that you could tell the viewers to change in their keeping of these animals, like one really big important advice, because I know there's a lot of different things that you can change, but what would you suggest? Hey, we're not doing this right, guys. Let's fix this.
Okay. So there's 100 different little tweaks, but maybe when I look at just the crested gecko enclosure, the idea that we should be filling it with clutter and that you should have big chunks of pork bark in there and that they're just going to live happily on that. They do, you know, I'm not denying that, but having thin branches that can be placed horizontally so they can be at the edge of these things, they can be moving through their environment, and they're not, you know, people think of a gecko as being stuck on a wall, and they're not like that, you know. These animals, in my idea, really, is that they're leaf mimics, you know. They're designed, their whole crest and their whole sort of spine looks like a leaf. They go out onto the edge of these branches to avoid the leeches that are obviously on the thicker branches, so they feel secure out there. And then you've got insects landing, it's crickets and stuff land on the end of these little leaves and stuff, so they can pick them off nicely. And in captivity, we sort of throw loads of clutter in there and then say, oh, this looks like a nice little chunk of rainforest, and actually something a bit more sparse. Probably not a bad shout. And even like revisiting your crested enclosure every now and again and making little tweaks. I don't think people do that enough. They go, this is bioactive, so it's perfect. Well, in a rainforest, changes all the time. You know? Yeah, exactly. You know, and then other things are like, you know, wet and dry. Like the wet season, it was raining pretty much non-stop. It was always 85% humidity plus, like, you know, 99 at night, quite frequently. It was constant. Dry season, you look at 55% humidity in the day. Like, it's really low. And we had about 7 minutes of rain on one day, and we had about 20 minutes of rain on one of the nights. And for the whole trip, like that's 3 weeks, you know. It's so they're two completely different seasons.
Sure.
And sitting somewhere in the middle is fine. You know, all our gecko activity, for example, I've got a little bit of data here, sort of sat between, you know, like it's sort of 65% humidity up to about 85% humidity, whether that be in the day during wet season or quite late in the evening in the dry season, that it was always there. And then like temperature wise, it was sort of somewhere between like 21.5 and about 25 degrees. So we were actually finding the geckos active. Again, that shifts a little bit, so it gets much cooler in the wet dry season. So those geckos are active.
Cooler during the dry season. Okay.
Yeah, so they're dry. It's technically their winter. So everything, when you consider it's obviously off the coast of Australia, you've got. It's easier to explain it as a wet and a dry rather than 4 seasons. Albeit there probably is 4 seasons. But whereas in the wet season, it's warm and wet all the time. So you're looking, 25 up to about 31 all the time, even through the night. In fact, sometimes it got a little bit warmer at night. In the dry season, it's going up to about 31, 32 in the middle of the day when you've got the sun beating down. But then as soon as the sun goes down, it drops off to about 20. So, that's why these geckos are so well suited to captivity and have these kind of room temperatures and stuff, because it sits smack bang in the middle of where they should be. Sure. So, I don't think we're doing anything wrong by creating a bit of an average. But I do wonder whether it's maybe a little disorientating for some of these geckos, and we might actually see more natural behaviours by letting it get hotter and drier during the day, and then cooling off a little bit more drastically. And in the wet season, chucking loads of water through. Instead of just a little mist before bed, give a proper sort of rainy season. It's something to consider anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Do you think these things are? I think I know the answer, but did you find any sort of proof that they are reproducing and breeding year-round?
No. So we didn't find any young, we didn't find any eggs. So it was kind of difficult. And none of the animals really looked like they were in any way gravid. So it's hard to say. I know, in my opinion, again, this is just a theory, I would say that they're probably utilising a lot of the epiphytic ferns to nest in, because they're all the way up through the trees. They're super dry. Even with rainfall, you've got a layer of nice humid but relatively dry sort of leaf litter. They attract loads of tiny little insects, so hatchling geckos might even utilise that through the wire. And most of these ferns are bigger than most terrariums. When you look at the size of a big bird's nest fern, even just the leaf litter section alone is at least a 45 cube.
Yeah.
And I know Manuel van Hagen, when they did their Exoterra expedition, was finding geckos in the ferns and in the axles. And we checked a few, we didn't find any. But the geckos are using those ferns. And it just seems bizarre that they would go straight past that perfect laying medium, go down to the ground, and risk, there's those crabs and predators. But again, it's hard to really sort of confirm that without the exact, sightings.
So what? You said you one of your main focuses was food, for lack of me trying to explain all of the things. But as far as bugs and fruits and the differences of the season, your wet and your dry season, what are some observations you made between the abundance of bugs and fruits during the two different seasons?
Yeah, so fruits were prevalent all year round, or at least for both expeditions. Yeah. Okay. So it wasn't like there was a fruit season and an insect season.
Interesting. I always thought differently. Interesting.
Yeah. If anything, we probably found more fruit in the dry season, but I don't know whether that was just because we were covering more ground, because you could just get through more habitat and stuff. But you'd find more kind of overripe fruit in the wet season, but with insects, the wet season was absolutely heaving with insects. You couldn't walk around with a head torch. You were being pelted with bugs and cicadas and
I remember you telling me last time all of the gnats and the bugs and stuff everywhere, the flies.
Yeah, it was manic. And even some of the footage you can see, we'll be filming a gecko and you got bugs landing on them, and it was nuts. There's stuff everywhere. And then in the dry season, certainly for the first 3 days, there was nothing, maybe a handful of moths. There really wasn't that many bugs. We didn't see nearly as many snails or baby snails like we were in the wet season. We, after rain, or actually just before rain and the following night, there was a lot more insects. So there was actually a bit where I was at the end of the expedition, I was saying we're really not seeing many bugs. This is one observation. just as my girlfriend's filming me, there's a bunch of bugs hitting my face and going around the camera. So I think that's very much like rain dependent. When you get a big downpour of rain, then the bugs still come out.
Sure,
It's not like they just disappear. But in the wet season, obviously that's happening more frequently, and you've got a lot more flying insects. We didn't find any, because I was quite keen to try and find like some caterpillars and things like that. We were finding lots of butterflies in the dry season that I feel like we weren't seeing as much of in the wet. But I didn't find any kind of caterpillars or soft-bodied prey or anything like that. And that was something that seemed relatively absent from both expeditions. Likewise with spiders as well. We weren't finding many arboreal spiders, which was kind of interesting. In most tropical environments, you get eye shine from just about every tree trunk, but we weren't really getting that. So I think they're probably eating more flying insects. Crickets, in the wet season, there was loads of crickets. In the dry season, less so. Little flies and gnats and stuff everywhere. Moths as well. And then we didn't see any massive catarrhids that we did in the wet season. We saw quite a few then, but we didn't see any in the dry.
Like in Dave Kaufman video, they were showing them. That's why I was curious if you did see any or not. But it's interesting to see that they found crickets, considering that's what we're feeding in captivity. I mean, most of us as a staple bug feeder, we're using crickets. I mean, not dubia roaches. I mean, I hate to say it, I mean, as nutritiously different as they are, I mean, crickets, from what I gather, seem to be more of a natural food source than dubia roaches.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. And also offering flying insects, like black soldier fly. If you just let the larvae just metamorph, or they become flying insects, same as wax moths and wax worms. Like they probably don't offer that much nutritionally, but if they get the gecko up and moving, and that's a natural food source for them, and they're on it from a young age, it might be worth incorporating some of these more creative kind of live foods. And when
I've done it with the soldier flies, the black soldier flies, and I've done it with the silk moths, the silkworms. I let them turn into moths and I feed them off. And I've also done it with the black soldier flies. And well, at least my chihuahuas, they get a kick out of it. They love winged bugs. Like even male dubias, if you can hold them by the body and get the wings to flutter, they go crazy over them. So that's interesting observation. Did you get to see anything eating by any chance? Did you nothing?
Not really, no. A lot of the time, the stuff's so far up. As soon as you get a torch on anything, that's it. They're like well in tune with it. And even like the crests, I sort of would imagine, like if you photograph cresty, for a little while, then even like the crests sort of drop and stuff to, I guess, stop some of that light coming in. So I think they are very light sensitive. And as soon as you...
It's cool you notice that. It's cool you notice that, because I notice it too, how they will adjust their crests as if they're closing their eyes, or, they almost make different facial expressions when you hit them with a light, that you can tell that something's bothering them. Mark, shut me up anytime by hopping in, bro, because I'm going to keep going, dude.
I'm absorbing. I have a good question. I have a question, right? So we've seen crested geckos in the wild. We've seen gargoyle geckos. We've seen lychees. If we haven't seen gargoyles?
We haven't seen gargoyles.
Still okay. I thought you found them, Thomas. I thought you found them.
So you asked me about the worst moment. I'll get on to that.
What about, we've seen Shahua.
We have seen Shahua, yeah.
Have we seen Uris?
No. So they were, rare. And I mean, there's a specific search area for them that I believe, a few people have told me as well. They sit on the end of these like Schefflera-like plants, and you get a lot of them. They have sort of like branches that come out and these stems that come out. So we were looking for them, but again, like my sole focus is looking for crested geckos. Yeah. So I think we probably just didn't spend enough time doing it. Like one day, I would love to get all the permissions and permits and take a group out and say, let's do a full survey of the island, with a team of people. And you've got some people looking at lower levels for Nactus, Bavaya, Uris, and some people looking way up for leeches and Chahua. And then you've got people in the middle for your Trachycephalus and your, Ciliatus. It would be really cool, but my focus has always been crested, really. Cresties, really.
Sure.
Okay. That's before I go into further questions. That's what I wanted to make sure what we saw and what we didn't see.
Yeah,
With the cresties, do you feel, based upon all the crested geckos that you've seen in the wild, right? And the crested geckos you see in captivity, do you feel that they are overweight in captivity? Like, are we feeding too much?
yeah.
Or is that just okay because they're in captivity?
I think we've bred them over a long period of time. So it's also interesting to note that there is the animals that we were in the location where the first crested geckos came from had broader heads than elsewhere. They were nicer looking crested gecko. So those first exports that came out of the hobby, I can absolutely see why those animals were selected. Like, it makes sense, and there is variability within the population. And so you can sort of you can see why this has happened, because you take a very small selection of geckos from the wild that have these broader heads and nicer colours and things like that. And then it doesn't take many generations before you end up breeding animals that are slightly chunkier, slightly more sort of robust. These things happened with bearded dragons in many ways. Whereas bearded dragons absolutely have a weight crisis, and they're carrying a huge amount of weight that they shouldn't be having, even for a sort of genetically slightly altered animal. I don't think suffer from that quite as heavily. I think it's a mix. I think some people do overfeed. I think we've had a habit of having high sugar diets that need to change. So Blue River again is trying to bring that sugar content as low as possible. They're the lowest fat or potentially lowest sugar diet available. And also, people just loving their animals and wanting to give them a bit more. They finish their little bowl of food, fill them up, so, and over time, that will have an impact for sure. And these geckos are, quite easy to feed. Whereas, like, if you have like a insectivorous species, or you've got a good balance of your insects and your sort of complete formulas, your animals moving around and hunting bugs and stuff like that. So it's probably burning a few of those calories as well.
I'm gonna say a lot more active.
Yeah. So I'm massively overweight, not as much as other animals in captivity, but I do think people need to be selecting lower fat diets and just being a little bit more conservative with it. In the wild, even if you find a whole patch of berries that are all, and some of them are soured and they're going a little bit overripe, and that's the kind of stuff that these geckos are eating. You're looking at by the time you smush it together in your fingers, there's not a lot of food. Whereas, I think people have this idea that these geckos are finding a whole papaya that's fallen to bits, and they can just lap that up like an ice cream, and that's just not the case. So I think moving the feeder dish around and potentially using different flavors and having smaller amounts is probably a healthier way of feeding your geckos, if you've got the time. I mean, of course, breeders aren't going to be doing that. But
I'd like to explain some of the, as hard as it was to find bugs some days. I know you said there was fruits available all the time, but I believe, and of course I haven't been there, but famine is natural, right? Like, famine is much more natural than overfeeding. I mean, it's likely these things are going without a meal more often than they're going with an extra meal in the wild. It's in captivity, we're feeding on a set schedule multiple times a day with 12 by 18 inches of space to move. I mean, these guys are moving 3 times that just to go 3 times, probably 100 times that just to get to the fruit to eat. It's two totally different elements and environments. I mean, and again, like you said, I genuinely believe that we, by selectively breeding, are obviously changing the structure of these captive animals. I mean, they're evolving due to selective breeding, if that makes any sense. But
I think there's definitely ways that we can try and bring that weight down, and that's another thing. Showcasing what like a wild cresty looks like is really important, so people have a metric to use. But like some of these, so there was one cresty that was quite high up when we spotted one night, and then it was still there 3 days later in the same tree, and it
Really?
moved. Yeah, it moved like a different height and stuff, not massively. But if that tree isn't fruiting and that gecko has stayed there for 3 days, you don't know. It could have obviously moved somewhere else, come back, and that just seems to be like a home territory. And it was the only time we've actually caught that, because usually if we find a gecko, it's gone the next night, and you just, it's either, I would imagine, moving slightly higher up or moving around somewhere. The a gecko that's staying in a tree that's not, it's not like they're all gathering around like day geckos, for example. You need a little bit of shootout. They're on it. You can't normally leave some breakfast out in Madagascar without 20 day geckos coming down and feeding on it. And the cresties aren't moving around like that, and they're pretty bulky animals and cool temperatures. At 20 degrees at night for much of the year, these animals need to be conserving some of that sort of energy and sort of being quite selective with their feeding. So I would imagine they're really not eating anywhere near as much as they are in captivity.
What's all the sightings of the crested geckos you have, like what do you find the most abundant as far as color, and are you seeing spots on every crested gecko?
No. So brown is really the go-to. So across most of our sightings, they're mostly brown. There was one that was shockingly yellow with like some
that
really
animal
nice
was beautiful. I keep meaning to talk about that animal, man. Beautiful with the white pinning and the white back. I can see that. I saw that animal, Thomas, and all types of things started making sense, man. That one animal had like 5 different traits going on, Mark. I don't know if you've seen it, but I'll send you a picture later and we'll post it in this link to this. I'll make sure I post a picture of this animal we're referencing. But that animal was gorgeous, man. Gorgeous. Where was that? What island did you find that on?
So that was Isle of Pine as well. There's certain things with like locality variation and stuff. Like I don't know whether I don't know. You don't want to talk too much about the prettiest animals in a population anyway, But when you consider that these traits that have popped up in this huge captive population that we have come from somewhere, and then to see an animal that possesses those traits is really cool. And there was a couple on this trip as well where we were finding animals with like little black spots and stuff, which we never found really in the first one. All the animals were very dull and brown, and I wonder whether even, this is probably a stretch because to hit me now, but the more sunshine, higher temperatures during the day, might actually just have them sort of firing up a little bit. Whereas if it's like cool and damp, like just warm and damp and pretty static through the wet season, maybe they're not quite as sort of active. I don't know, but we did notice a very big difference between the two expeditions and the types of animals that we were finding. So I imagine if somebody spent a long time out there, and they might be able to actually map some differences between some of these animals.
Interesting.
So it's not so to speak that you went to Isle of Pines and you went someplace else and you're seeing 2 different types of crested geckos?
No.
Oh,
it's not yeah. I mean, if it was like, say they suddenly found that crested geckos occurred on one of the islands off of the Isle of Pines, and those animals happen to all be this bright yellow color and all that, then that would be really interesting. But it's not that. I think there's a few kind of anomaly animals in there. Not even anomaly, really, because when you look at the captive population, these traits are prevalent, and they would have been in that first stock as well. But there are just animals that are, prettier than other animals.
Even when you look at Rhacodactylus, though, I don't see a crested gecko in Rhacodactylus that was as beautiful as that one you found. I mean, that was an amazing specimen for a wild. That makes sense. Like I said, it made a lot of things make sense. I can see where a lot of things came from. It had a lot of stuff going on, man.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to see that. And
And I
even
think
like the eye,
structurally, he didn't have a bad head. He had one of the, as far as the wild specimen go, he was a solid animal, man.
yeah. I mean, when I first spotted him, because obviously you sort of see these animals sort of going up the tree or whatever, and I was like, is that an albino? Have I got my light, my torch in the wrong setting or something? Like, it was insane. So just a really cool animal to see. And then, like you say, yeah, it makes sense. Everything, you start piecing it together, and you go, we haven't just well, we have taken a small selection of animals and then bred the best traits, but those traits were always there, and it's just interesting, because even from a like evolutionary perspective, why would you sort of bright yellow gecko with white spots on it in an environment like that? And how is it persisting and looking so healthy? It just makes you ask 100 more questions.
Sure. That's just crested geckos. Look at Chihuahuas, mainland versus Pine Island. I would love to have more information to talk about those. But I mean, when you talk about the white collars and the lichen mimics on these animals and the environment, my mind wants to explode when I think about how one living organism can quite literally evolve to mimic another living organism in the same environment. To me, my brain hurts trying to wrap my thoughts around how that's even possible. Well, you look at some of these Chihuahuas, and some of the environments you were in were clearly not Chihuahua environments, but I could see how the environments differed and how one animal could evolve and adapt to said environment. It is just insane.
Yeah.
I still can't quite grasp how and why. It's amazing. And to be fair, crested, I don't want to say crested geckos do it the least, because I'm sure those whites and all of those visual characteristics, like you said, the fringing fits somewhere in that environment. They're mimicking something. They're doing something. It's
but
impressive. Very interesting.
Different Rhacodactylus that mimic lichens and mosses. Like, if you've got a canopy that's less dense than another canopy, that's where animals are going to exist, or if you've got a canopy, so all these little islands off the coast of Isle of Pines and stuff that have very light canopy anyway, even if you've got a higher abundance of, say, Cook's pine, that then doesn't give the evergreen, the other sort of trees enough chance to grow. Like, if an animal persists in an environment and something as tiny as the canopy cover is slightly different, eventually it will sort of change in different directions, and it is fascinating. I think New Caledonia is a perfect example of that, and it's great that actually there's a lot of keepers, especially like young keepers. I know you say crusties aren't quite the same, but that are being introduced. Like my first reptile was a leopard gecko. I absolutely love that leopard gecko. It's nice to see such an engaged sort of younger audience that maybe their first gecko is a crested gecko or gargoyle gecko, and they're asking so many questions on some of these platforms and stuff that's really quite like maybe not advanced, but perhaps a little bit more higher level sort of ecology kind of questions. It's always nice to see that,
Well, you're inspiring all types of people, Thomas. I'm telling you, it's like, I mean, people don't know that we're friends, that I talk to all the time, and people are always the way people talk. Do you know the guy from EK Magazine? The guy he was just in New Caledonia. I'm like, I talk to him all the time. He's a buddy of mine, man. He's doing real things. Did you see the video of New Caledonia? There's a guy. He's out there right now. He's filming. I saw this. I'm like, he's doing it. I'm telling you, but. You're catching a lot of attention, man, and rightfully so. You should. I mean, not everybody is this plastic box and paper towel type of guy. There's a lot of us out there that will always use nature as our proxy, and you cannot simply use nature as your proxy if you don't have data from nature. And up until now, the information we've had has been pretty dated, and technology at that time when this information was generated is update it, so we've been starving for this new information, this updated information. And
and I think that's it as well. It's like, it's a transition, and working on the magazine is like a passion project. I loved working on the magazine. I was proud of it when it came out every month, but the readership just paled in comparison to the amount of views and impressions and stuff for what we're doing now. And when you know that you've got a young audience, or you've got you can reach a wider audience with something like this, you can be pretty confident that you're having a better or a bigger impact on animal welfare, which is always the sort of core of what I've done. Yeah, it's nice to see it. Don't get me wrong, some of the comments and stuff, especially for the beardy stuff, it's like banging your head against a brick wall. But a lot of it is just nice to see,
What's a common myth? A common myth that you found through your field work that is just not true?
What, for crested geckos? Yeah.
I got one.
I can't even think one to ask. Like,
Yeah, go on. Yeah, what's your one?
What do you think these animals? Why do you think so many crested geckos don't have tails?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good question.
Is there a lot of birds? Do you see a lot of birds or anything? I mean, it seems like it's so hard for you to find them. Like, what the hell could be preying on them so much that they just don't have tails?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I think, but there are a lot of birds and birds of prey as well. And when a cresty reaches a decent size, it's I'd imagine there's quite a small selection of birds that will predate on them, though. But you find like different hawks. We've encountered the same. I think it was the same barn owl every time we drove to the spot.
I was just going to say, I was reading about owls. There's actually I don't know if it's endangered or something, but there's a very unique owl that inhabits one of the islands, if not all of the islands, New Caledonia. Very small little owl. I was reading an article about him. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it could have even been one of them, but we initially stopped on the drive home because we saw something on one of the the telegraph lines, like the telephone things, and thought it was a lychee, and then we sort of stopped, and I was like, what's that? And then like it flew down and sat on the road, and then every night we drove back on that road, it came down and just sat in the middle of the road, almost like waiting for us. It was really weird. But yeah, there's definitely birds of prey out there anyway. That is a bit of a tangent. Myth about crested geckos as well. I think the UV one was somehow slipped my mind there. But I would say just provide UV. Like, these animals are not interactive. Are they super reliant on UV? Well, no. People kept them for a long time without UV and bred them, you could probably get away with it. But it's not the most natural way of keeping these animals. They encounter some of that UV, especially in certain patches within the forest, will hit 7 or 8. These animals should be able to have UVB in their environment and understand the day and night cycle. So that would be my take, really, is try to incorporate UV lighting. Even, if you think that they don't need it, there's probably 100 reasons we haven't discovered yet that they do. And they do absolutely encounter it in the wild, and they are exposed to it at moderate levels. We found them in the day, so to give it the nod.
Can you go over some of your UV readings too, if you don't mind? Can you tell us some of the information you gathered, like what type of, the time of day, the UV index you were getting? I remember I was watching one of your reels, and you said at one point you were only getting, I'm sure it was one of that times it was raining, but you were barely getting about 2%. What were some of these UV readings, you were getting out there?
Yeah, so the UV, the gecko that we found during the day, it was like 0.5 UVI at the time that it was exposed, and we found it. But that's probably because, the whole wet season, actually, there was like hardly any UVI, or that whole expedition anyway, because you've got so much cloud cover, and it's cyclone season, bringing a lot of clouds over the Pacific Ocean, and then they get caught on Isle of Pine. So even when it's sunny in Noumea or on Grande Terre, on the coastal areas, the high altitude areas where you find crested geckos on Grande Terre, and the Isle of Pines that has, it goes up to 260 meters above sea level, so it's not very high, but still captures cloud cover. So in the wet season, UV is very, very low. Still there, still prevalent, and there are patches where it might go up to 2 or 3. But I don't think we recorded anything higher than about 3. Whereas on this expedition, and again, it's quite difficult because you've got cloud cover, you've got different things to contend with, but we would go out every hour and just try and put the solar at this time, wherever we can get it, to try and pull together a bit of an average. It's not the most accurate way of recording UVI, but it's the best we really can, because
better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And we were finding that we're spiking up to an average over the whole thing, a 6.3 by 11 a.m. And then dipping off.
6.3,
so at
really?
7 a.m. Yeah. At 7 a.m. it was like 0.6, and then 9 a.m. going up to about 2.8. 11 a.m. huge spike up to 6.3, and then it would start dipping off again. So by 1 it was 5.1, and by 3 it was 2.63 again, and then by 5 it was 0.6, and pretty much gone after that. So it's this.
And that's when you were finding the most active, right? Was around that time. When were you? Well, I don't know what time the sun sets, but at the time you were finding them most active, what were your UV readings?
Well, 0. Certainly on this expedition. So we were finding them in the wet season. They were out during the day, and we find them at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and you'd be looking at the exact reading was 0.5. But
that's what I'm saying. I'm wondering if it's the UV that they're reading that's keeping them out of the way. If they're out during the day. Because again, we talked about this before, but animals see UV rays that we don't. They see wavelengths that we don't see. It could simply be the UV that keeps them hidden during the day. If it's raining and there's overcast and there's not a high UV index and you're seeing these animals out, it's kind of like a direct, link to them. It's just, don't mind me. I'm just thinking out loud.
No, I get it. And it's good. From a terrarium perspective, to have that cycle for them. But another thing that I sort of hypothesize is that it's actually humidity as a driver of activity. Obviously, in the wet season, it's more humid during the day, so they're going to be more active. But also in the dry season, we found that when it was a hot, dry day, they would come out much later. So they would wait until that humidity has exceeded 75% before they're active. We also found that in the wet season, they were much lower down. That humidity is obviously brought lower, and they can be a bit more active there. Whereas in the dry season, they're further up into the canopy, amongst leaves, where you're going to have a slightly more humid environment. So I think probably humidity plays a big part in when these animals are active. But likewise, UV, when they know that it's the daytime and they might be exposed to predators, then absolutely, hide away.
Have you seen babies in the wild?
No, we've not. Which is a shame, really. I was really hoping for one off this last expedition.
They got to be somewhere. They're just hiding from you. There's somewhere.
Yeah, that's why I asked. I wanted to know if you've seen babies and if you've seen multiple together.
That would be really cool. Yeah. I think the thing is, as well, it's spotting them like a tiny little gecko, obviously, but against bark. And so, like when you find crested geckos, you usually find that white bit of their belly sticking out from something, rather than, if you look at them directly on, other than during the day, where obviously you can see them a bit easier. It's quite hard because obviously you're in the jungle and a tiny little gecko would go relatively unnoticed. Would be really cool to find one, but
anywhere underneath the underside of
Thomas,
leaves.
let me ask you something. So you said that you're looking up high for the crested geckos, right? Have you ever tried looking low? The reason why I ask this is because in some of my cages in the past, right, everybody claims that they're always arboreal, but I have had crested geckos dig in the dirt and hide down low.
Yeah. So this is where my theory for the ferns sort of come from. Really, is that
These
these
natural
if these
humid
geckos are
hide.
a tree, yeah, they might come down to the closest epiphytic fern and tuck themselves into those ferns. So they're not necessarily on the ground because these ferns are probably 5 meters up into the trees, but there is a level of substrate for them to tuck into, and that is yeah. But I've not tried looking, so actually that might be a good reason to go back and try again next year. Any excuse, really. I think that's it. I probably found 100 gargoyle geckos, but I need a reason to go back next year.
I'm a good person to look in the dirt if you need help.
Yeah.
All right.
I've had a few volunteers for these trips.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Did you find during the day? Did you find them hiding, sleeping anywhere? Where were they sleeping? Did you nothing like that? And what again? I keep meaning to ask you, what equipment did you bring with you? Like, what kind of lenses did you have on your camera? Were you using binoculars? Were you using? I mean, I know you obviously had a hydrometer and a UV reader, but what type of tools did you bring with you, and what did you find successful having? What was useful, I guess, having with you?
Yeah, so a good quality torch is where to go to. The binoculars, actually, I didn't take binoculars with me. And then when it was my girlfriend's idea. She was like, you might want some. I was like, yeah. Like, we didn't find any leeches the first time. Then maybe that was the whole reason why. So we managed to get just some cheap ones from Decathlon before we got the ferry over to the Isle of Palms. And they were very handy for at least like identifying geckos. So, for example, that Chahua could well have been, another Rhacodactylus. It could have been a young lychee from without binoculars, and then you see the body shape and you get a little bit more idea for what it is. So the binoculars were handy. The lenses, I have a macro lens, but obviously it is 105mm thick, so you can get some fair distance with it, and also a wide angle and diffuser. Didn't really use that this time quite as much. And then like my phone, like just a good quality phone is pretty good. You get all the content with it, and better than the last time as well. So like that's next time I definitely need a mic. So we got out there. We use obviously editing software that it's pretty good for cleaning up noise and that kind of thing. But I would definitely recommend a better mic. Hygrometer, thermometer, laser sort of surface temperature thermometer, UVI meter, like a solar meter. We didn't take a power density meter. For the crested geckos, fine, really, because we weren't seeing them basking. They're not active baskers. But for the bearded dragons, we definitely took one. And then,
Did you come back home before you went to Australia, or did you just go right to Australia? Well, obviously you had to come from Australia, right? You flew in from Australia.
So we went via Australia out to New Caledonia, and then I've got a few friends living in Sydney, and my sister's out in Perth as well. So it was more like a holiday extended trip kind of thing. But we worked with a beardy vet, Jonathan Howard. He's a vet and a herpetologist that has spent 15 years working on beardies. He gave us a pretty good spot for beardies. Wow. So obviously all that content's really good. We had, I think, just shy of a week going out finding beardies and filming them and that kind of thing. But his data, so for example, the lab results for the soil composition and the hours of activity and all that kind of thing, he sort of said, you're doing a really good thing with EK, you're welcome to it. And so it's all reinforced with about 15 years of research, whilst also giving people that introduction to the actual habitat with photos and videos, etc. So, it was a nice way of sort of tagging that on, really.
Cool. Did you bring any type of probes or anything to test like soil pH or soil humidities or anything to do with the substrates of the island?
Yeah, we did actually. So we took some pH testing kits. That again was a bit of a last minute thing. I'd not I'd meant to order it before I left, but then got there, found a shop in Noumea, by miracle, just managed to find that out.
Cool.
Just find one.
Which I think is huge. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, so the pH was like 7. So, no, not 7, sorry, 8. So it's slightly alkaline. So that I think that means that nutrients can be passed through the soil a little bit easier. It wasn't heavily alkaline, but I'd imagine that a lot of nutrients are being passed on to the plants. And the Isle of Pine sits on the
I'd imagine.
Yeah.
I'd imagine a lot of that stuff is, oceanic reef organic material. I say it all the time. Even when I build my enclosures, I use a soil that's got a lot of like kelp and fish proteins and stuff in it. This Frog Farms topsoil I use, it's got a lot of lime salt. I try to mimic reef decay, and again, sea life probably makes up a lot of the substrate on these islands. And I've never really had any proof, but my logic has always told me that it makes some sort of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Isle of Pine is built on an old dead coral bed. Basically, it's like an ancient coral bed.
There you go. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then there's even caves underneath where you can see the stalagmite coming down, and you can see all the crystals being formed, and it's all essentially calcium.
Did you film that? Did you film that?
Yeah. We've got loads of footage and
post it though, right? Or I just missed it. How the hell did I miss that?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I need to double down on posting some of that. But yeah,
are you going to make a YouTube video? Or are you going to make one long YouTube video or something?
Yeah, we're doing like the documentary that we did the first time. We've got the same production crew coming back to do a comparison, all the new data, do a bearded dragon one as well, and maybe even like a sort of third one that because it's in my mind. I'm like, do I do brand new updated crested gecko documentary that encompasses everything, or do I do a part 2 of the first one and do it as reflection? I don't know, but we've got some cool stuff coming up anyway, and we'll have all that data up, and even the precise sort of scientific names of every single plant that we found, all the dead leaves in the substrate, all of that's going on the Blue River website, all going to be open access. There's basically nothing that we'll be holding back, especially once we've got these products being created where we have the most natural diets possible. It's going to be cool.
So Blue River, Mark, and again, my bad if I keep talking, just shut me up. Blue River, I don't think I've ever checked out their website. Is Blue River, do they have like an information section on their site?
Well, this is what we're sort of working on now. So obviously a lot of the stuff, so the Blue River team, obviously do all the Blue River stuff. I'm sort of strictly EK, but when it comes to this kind of research, it makes sense for me to write some of this because it's just more contextualized. So Nathan runs their social media accounts, and we work very closely together. So we give him sort of information, and but any of the sort of really technical bits, we're going to be working on blog posts, and it will have everything. I'm really keen to tell the stories of those first crested geckos that came out. Arrange interviews with the guys at Orston that signed off the export permits and get the a really holistic picture on what crested geckos are, because there's an appetite for it. And I think what I love about crested gecko keepers is it really seems like people jumping in at the deep end with what is a lot of people's first reptile. There needs to be that. Just
went past. Well, no, I think bearded dragon still holds number 1. I was just reading some statistics the other day for 2025, and crested geckos were like the second or third most popular reptile pet. Bearded dragons was still number 1, which has been like for the last 15 years or something, they said. And then it was leopard gecko, crested gecko, or crested gecko, leopard gecko. But yeah, I mean, millions of them, I'd imagine, are out here in captivity globally. People keeping these things for single pets, not breeders, not people like in Marc and I's world, but just people that want a cool pet and a terrarium in their house, or keeping crested geckos.
And they're perfect. They're well-natured. They have omnivorous, but mostly frugivorous diet. They're relatively straightforward, but it means that this sounds a bit. But like keepers can focus on really fun things, like building a really nice bioactive terrarium. They're all like, and as long as their lighting's right and they've got the resource to do it, they can really create something like special there. Whereas I think in the past, a lot of people go, yeah, I want a pet snake or something, and what's the easiest way to keep them? And there's all this conflicting information, but I feel like with crested gecko keepers, people they go straight into bioactive, they go straight into asking all the questions. They know their animal's got a really cool backstory because it was thought to be extinct for however long. You know, it's a good sort of like springboard, I guess, for people into the hobby.
Sure do. They hit a lot of the marks. You know, they hit a lot of the marks for what it takes to be a popular animal. I mean, we often talk about this all the time, just amongst my friends and stuff. It takes a very unique aligning of the universe, if you will, to create a species as popular as crested geckos are. You know, not everything can be a crested gecko. You know, there's just a lot of things that line up to put them where they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any zoos in New Caledonia or any like keepers trying to do conservation efforts or anything with the crested geckos?
So there is a zoo. Unfortunately, we didn't get to go there this time. So we had a few days in the year. We were meant to have a day at the aquarium, but it ended up being broken into two, so we didn't quite get out to the zoo. So there is a zoo, and they do keep leeches, and I think they've got gargoyles and crested. I don't think they have many other geckos. Yeah, but apparently it's illegal to actually keep geckos in New Caledonia, which I can kind of understand. Like in the way that Australia was busts for smuggling because people were allowed to keep wild animals, so you know they catch them, they keep them, and then next thing you know they've shipped them out, by unscrupulous means, kind of thing. It's probably easier to have like a straight down the middle. You cannot keep the geckos in this country, but it does end up. You sort of feel like they've got an incredible natural resource that the world is already talking about, that people are passionate about and want to support and protect, but is being sort of swept under the rug a little bit. It's a shame. Just gonna,
speaking of the aquarium, you said aquarium. I just got hip to how popular New Caledonia was for its marine life. New Caledonia has like an extremely rich, biodiverse marine life around there. I mean, that's probably more popular. People probably go there more to check out the marine life and snorkel and scuba dive than they do trek land looking for geckos, from what I gather.
Water.
Absolutely, yeah, it's insane. Like, I think I saw more. Bear in mind, we did quite well on geckos this time, and skinks. There's heaps of skink species as well.
I saw you posted one. What was that, by the way? What was that skink? Was that one of those terror skinks or whatever they're called?
Oh, no. That was the green belly. I think they call them green-bellied skinks. It's Epibator nigrofasciolatus, I think, something like that. They're quite common. They're like everywhere. Yeah, really, really nice.
Are they arboreal, or is that a terrestrial species?
They're kind of semi-arboreal, yeah. Like you get them on like tree trunks and stumps and things, but they don't go much higher than a few meters, really.
You think they're big enough to prey on crested geckos? Do you think they're eating crested geckos like some other species?
I'm not sure, and I wouldn't want to answer that. I mean, they get to about this big, but I would imagine they're mostly eating insects. Again, it's hard to really say. It's not like the Rhacodactylus that have the most diverse kind of diet of any gecko.
Yeah. Well, I'm just curious because when you think about crested geckos, should they not be laying eggs in the ferns like you're saying, it's probably quite a challenge. If you've ever hatched crested geckos in captivity, you see they don't just shoot out of the egg and take off. They linger for a little bit, you know? Yeah. So it's probably a bit of a challenge for them to get out of the egg and up into a tree if there's, predators like that hovering at the lower bits of the forest.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, like a sea turtle trying to make it to the ocean, if you will. It's quite a challenge just to get to its environment. Because there's got to be a reason why they're not, if they're protected and they're not as abundant as they are in captivity. Look how many we can make in captivity.
Yeah.
Prohibiting that in the wild.
Yeah, I mean, these, like, there's crabs everywhere, so I think that would be the main sort of terrestrial predators, like big crabs. Like, they would absolutely make a meal of a little baby crested gecko, no problem. And it's like every pet that you take, they're everywhere.
What type are they? What are they? Are they like the vampire crabs or ghost crab or something like that?
So you get
it's one of them too. I've seen on the iNaturalist.
Yeah, maybe. In fact, that's probably a good idea. I should have had all this research ready, shouldn't I?
No, that's not my fault. Nothing.
And then you also get some like massive they kind of look like mud crabs, or like the kind of stuff that you get from Australia in the mangroves and that kind of thing, like chunky things.
Interesting.
Yeah, loads of stuff.
Yeah,
that would just be a theory, But then at the same time, crested geckos also live on Grand Terre. They also live in quite high elevation areas where you've not got this coral seabed and this calcium still at base, and there isn't crab everywhere, and there isn't. But in them environments, you've got cargo and things like that, sort of flightless birds that will feed on, they feed on grubs and stuff. So maybe a little hatchling gecko would be on the menu.
Sure.
So,
it can still eat everything, right? I mean, if it's a flightless bird, probably eat a lot of them. To be honest.
Yeah.
One more selfish personal question. When you were when you were on the Isle of Pines, what would you say the height of the canopy is? How high is it from the forest floor to the top of that canopy? How high is this forest?
There would be points. So there's like buckney trees that grow throughout that are like massive. Regular trees are also quite tall. You've got like maybe
so it's staggered then? It's pretty like a staggered canopy? Oh, okay.
So
I thought it had like a...
Yeah, it's not that obvious. The geckos are like sort of in the understory, maybe between like 3 and 5 meters. But then above that, you've got these massive trees that have like thick branches that you have the leeches and the chewers on. That probably goes up to maybe 10, 15 meters. But some of the trees are massive, 15 meter plus. But it's not like a distinct canopy. If you were to say what would be the most dense bit of foliage here, it would be between probably 5 meters and maybe 8 or 9 meters, that sort of area. Yeah.
Just taking notes.
During the dry season compared to the wet season, did you see an abundance of snails?
Yeah, so in the wet season, heaps of snails. They're everywhere. There's actually a local endemic species on. I don't know if it's endemic to New Caledonia or to the Isle of Pines, but it's like a cuisine. People like harvest them, and they're everywhere. The people have been eating snails out there for a long time. And also,
did you try one?
I didn't know. Well, this is the thing. So our hotel, I only had it as a main, and I thought if this is going to be my meal for the evening, and I end up ordering these, and obviously you've got a time. So dinner was run from like 5 till maybe 6:30 or 7, but like sunset was 6. So we needed to be out in the field for that time. So we were really selective with when we could eat. So I was like, if I get this plate of snails and I don't like it, I'm going to be absolutely distraught. So no, I didn't try one. But they've also got the African land snails out there as well that are invasive.
The giant ones, the big ones?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, so there's just snails everywhere, and obviously little baby ones. We were finding them at least at head height, so they'll probably go a little bit higher up as well. And I'd imagine they serve a great sort of calcium source to most reptiles out there, to be honest.
Hey Thomas, was that sunset 6 o'clock both wet and dry season?
Good question. I think it was earlier in the wet season, but I don't know if we took data. I remember being quite surprised that it was. Was it? I think it was later. It changed. So on Grand Terre, I remember it being like 5:45, and then by the end of the expedition, it was like 6:10. Then we were recording it. Again, that might have been because on Grand Terre we had a few beers by that point. It did. It did shift. I need to let me get that data for you because I don't want to tell you wrong. But
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
just
it was.
curious, I got these new lights. I have these new lights and I can gauge when I can sync them with a missing system. So I'm trying to figure out a way if I sync them with my misting system on days that I run it higher, certain months out of the year that I run them higher, I can actually set the sun and the UV lower earlier. So it'd be cool to have that data.
Yeah. Let me check. In fact, even if I went through some of my photos and stuff, I think I could make a good idea for.
Well, when we finish this and post this, I'm going to link. Well, I would have obviously asked you, but I'd like to link some of your content, your pages at least, so people can reference these things we're talking about.
Yeah,
Hey,
and it's like I tried to. Sorry, Mark.
Sorry, yeah, it's all right. Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I try to answer as many questions as possible in the DMs and stuff, but sometimes, it's just.
Of course. Not everybody has the same questions, It is what it is.
That's what I was going to say just now. Like, if there's any information, I know we're asking you questions left and right, but maybe there's something specific that you want to talk about or share,
So I've put together, basically, I'll be presenting a lot of this at the British Herpetological Society conference next year in March.
Where is that?
Yeah, it's at a place called Drayton Manor, which they've hosted it there for the last for years. But it's an annual conference. I've been most years. Last year I was out of the country, so I couldn't go. But it's a really good community. It's a mix of people from all over the world. We tend to have guest speakers from the US as well, and you've got private keepers, you've got zookeepers, you've got academics, you've got all sorts of people, and it's a really, really good opportunity for people to even just mix with other people. Yeah, it's a small conference in terms of numbers, but it's probably the best, and the best definitely in the UK for a long time. And it only takes going once or maybe twice, and you're sort of in the mix kind of thing.
I bet. And, I have a couple buddies of mine from Just Geckos UK, Jake and Jeff. They're awesome. They just went to India. They just did a herp tour of India looking for a bunch of species of geckos, and I'd imagine they probably know about it and they'll probably be there. But they are two father and son team, brilliant guys. That's I don't want to bash my fellow American keepers by any means. God knows I'm not, but it seems that UK enthusiasts a little more science based. They're the bar's a little higher. They really use that nature as a proxy thing in good stuff. Very good stuff.
I guess we've got a smaller population anyway, so
that's what they always say too. There's less of them.
But I think in America as well, you've got people that have been keeping for a long time, and you guys have got native herps that you can go out and people from maybe a few generations back that go out and just catch things and keep things, and so you've got a wider variety of people. Whereas I feel like in Europe, we've sort of followed a very narrow channel, which sits quite nicely against kind of I don't know, herpetology or that kind of thing. So I'm waffling now, to be honest.
Well, that's good. I didn't mean to distract you. I want to hear what you were going to say about what you're talking about at the conference. You were getting ready to tell us some information.
Basically just that I'll be talking at that. So if there is anything, I've put together a bit of a presentation. I'm just flicking through this now to think if there's anything that we haven't covered in this conversation.
Will they broadcast that? Is there any way that people that can't make it to the UK, do you think there's anything you do to have it live streamed somehow? So guys like myself that would love to watch it could watch it. I mean, maybe even if you do something like a $5, $10 streaming fee, people would pay to be able to watch. And I mean, that would be super cool, man. I know a lot of people in the US would be interested in that, man. I for one, would absolutely pay to watch it, let alone watch it for free.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'll have a word with them because obviously it's a
That
non-profit,
would be awesome.
BHS. So anything that they could do to sort of raise some money and that would be really good. So I'll raise it with them and see if it's something they'd like to do. And then obviously
Definitely let me know.
the documentary coming out soon as well, and cover a lot of the stuff. So between the documentary, the presentation, the Blue River website, there'll be loads of stuff. I can't actually think of anything off the top of my head that we haven't covered already. It isn't just lots of kind of data and boring graphs and stuff, but I
We
mean, I
didn't
think
really dabble into gargoyle territory. I'm curious if you don't mind. I mean, what are some misconceptions about? A lot of people think that because these species come from New Caledonia, that they're all just kept the same. I know for a fact that you explored two different habitats, and know for a fact that there's some drastic differences between gargoyle habitats and crested gecko habitats. Is there maybe a few myths or something that you could clear the air of about those different environments?
yeah, absolutely. So
If you don't mind,
yeah, sure. So the gargoyle geckos occupy like macky shrubland and also humid forest. So they're quite versatile with their habitat usage, and they're found on Grand Terre, mostly in the southern province. I think pretty much only in the southern province. The crested geckos are found in essentially rainforest, like tropical wet evergreen forest. So on the Isle of Pines, that's lowland, but still gets loads of rain. On Grand Terre, that's slightly higher elevation. So in Blue River Park, it goes up to, I think, about 1,000 meters above sea level. And sort of the start
that
at
place
about
is beautiful. What a beautiful
yeah,
park. Oh my God.
it's really cool, yeah. And then there's other like further north you go into like there's like Grand Fougere as well. There's a few different parts. There is actually more sightings or more populations of crested geckos than I think people realise. So in 2015, there was a population discovered right on the north of Grand Terre, on a place called Nihao River, which sort of means that their overall range is probably a lot larger than we ever expected, which is why in 2017 the IUCN listed them as a vulnerable species rather than perhaps endangered, or if they were only in Blue River or or on the Isle of Pines, perhaps even critically endangered. I mean, the fact they occur in a protected area, maybe we would have swayed they're probably more endangered, but because obviously that population was found right in the north in 2015, there's a lot that we don't know, and they occur in other places. And there's actually been populations in Yate, populations down in Plume as well, which are slightly lower elevations, and they, and they're supposedly crested geckos there. So the distribution, there is a bit of overlap, but it's the habitat that is different. So gargoyle geckos, obviously, you only have to look at the gargoyle gecko. They've got claws, essentially, stripes down their body, much more narrow. They've even developed this sort of head structure that makes them look like bumpy kind of twigs and stuff. And they grasp branches similar diameter to themselves, and that's their method of camouflage. And that's very similar to, even there's parallels between other diprodactyl geckos in Australia, like Strophosaurus are commonly kept. They kind of hold on to branches, camouflage, and that kind of thing. And I think gargoyles have sort of followed that. And so they're found in a range of habitats, including macky shrubland, which is very open, characterized by lots of sort of relatively low-level shrubs. But because it's high elevation, it's still very, very humid. And the temperature's slightly cooler than, say, on the Isle of Pines, but there's parallels between the husbandry or the environmental parameters that crested geckos and gargoyle geckos live in. But when you actually look at the habitat, it's very different. So gargoyles will have much more diverse sort of like shrubs that they'll be holding on to. When you look on iNaturalist, for example, a lot of the sightings of gargoyle geckos are on the ground, crossing over this red nickel-rich dirt. They move distances to across the floor, whereas crested geckos always have like a connected canopy that they can move across the understory So you'd be very unlikely to see a crested gecko on the floor. Crested geckos generally on like horizontal branches, whereas gargoyle geckos are much more like vertical. A lot of the studies, I think it was Snyder, or was it? There was another paper that basically assessed their habitat preference in Blue River Park. Most of the sightings are in maquis shrubland, a few in humid forest. And even when you go to locations where you've got high natural sightings, like where it is a humid forest, you can see like it's all very thin tree trunks, all very vertical, all very dense. Whereas, cresties are more in kind of jungle habitat if you had to describe it. So I'd be saying for both of them,
what about the fruit diversity? Were you finding the same type of fruits in the gargoyle environment as you are in a crested gecko?
No, not really. No, there was still some kind of like berries and fruits in the environment, but like another kind of flagship paper was on this stomach flushing of gargoyle geckos, and they found that they have the most diverse diet of any gecko species. They found Caledonia skincus, they found Bavaria septuclavia, so 2 lizard species in their stomach, a bunch of different pollens, fruit aggregates like seeds. So these animals eat a huge diversity of stuff. And a friend of mine, I don't know if you know Matisse Sweepers, did a book on the reptiles of Suriname. He went over to New Caledonia to photograph them. He got some nice, I don't know if he got footage or photos of these gargoyles actually stalking other geckos. So they'll sit in ambush position on the top of these thin branches and wait for skinks or Bavaria to move underneath and then pounce down and grab them.
I have seen it with my own 2 eyes. I'll just leave it at that. I have seen it with my own 2 eyes.
Yeah, it's crazy, and
they are hunters.
I think that would be, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't know. They go, I like a crested gecko, but I want something a bit different. So they buy a gargoyle and set it up exactly like a cresty, and it shouldn't really be like that. That's why a lot of the stuff that I'm putting out there, and we had a nightmare looking for gargoyle geckos, and I'll put my hands up, we didn't find any. So someone might just call bullshit on basically everything that I'm saying, but when you
the environment speaks more than just the animal.
Well, this is it, and you've got we made sure that we walk the exact trails that in published academia. Some just friends point me in the right direction. All the signs on some of the trails that through Blue River Park have gargoyle geckos on for certain habitats. We spoke to exactly where the rangers. We said we want to find auriculatus. They sent us to the exact spot where they find them. So we've got a pretty good idea for where they are. Fortunately, the night that we went out to really hike and give it our best shot was we plugged all our torches in. This was the worst moment of the entire trip, possibly in my life. Plugged all of our torches in. We got special permissions to be in this location with this particular campervan company. Parked it ready to go. Got out, made a bit of dinner. Sun goes down, and batteries died. So for some reason, the battery in the campervan had just blown up all our torches. So head torch, main torch, and backup just bust. So we had nothing to use, and then couldn't even charge our phones or anything. We couldn't leave the park as well because everything gets locked up. So it was like, it was soul destroying. I made a video of it and I've not posted it. And I thought, actually, don't want to see that again. So we were unlucky with that, and it's hopefully going to apply a bit more pressure to Blue River to send us out there again. But it is what it is. So the environment, we're focusing mostly on the maquis shrubland when I'm putting content out, because that's the most stark difference that I think people have when they go, oh wow, that looks nothing like what I expected. Albeit they do live in humid forests, and there is probably a middle ground where you would find gargoyle geckos. But it's interesting to see that these animals are coming from there, and the animals in these habitats are probably most not threatened because they've really slowed down the mining in New Caledonia, but they would have faced huge population losses just from a century of mining nickel straight out the centre of their habitats.
Remember you telling me that. What are they mining again? I forgot what you told me. What are they mining over there?
I think it's a mix of nickel and copper. So I think they've really slowed down on it now. I don't think the damage has been done. They've built entire lakes, man-made lakes. Oh, that's a really beautiful lake. Actually, it was just a mine, and now it's full of water. It is what it is. It's upsetting to see, but at least they're going in the right direction. And our way out of New Caledonia, we were questioned to the nines about absolutely everything. Where we're being, what we're doing, flag search, and you know what? Fair play to them. We've gone over there, we've seen these animals, we've photographed these animals. They are a target for poachers. And they deserve it. They're well. If you go over there with any inclination of wanting to see reptiles, authorities will absolutely know about it. And it was encouraging because there's been a lot of countries that I've been to and hurt, and they've done everything responsibly, but then nobody bats an eyelid, and you're still seeing issues with stuff. So actually, stricter regulations, I think, are warranted, especially in New Caledonia.
Necessity, absolutely.
Yeah, but it is a shame when you see the amount of destruction and logging and things like that going on, and they kind of let's not even talk about the geckos. When they could just come up with some very clear instructions. You can do this, you can't do this. Here's a network of guides that can potentially make some money for the local communities, maybe even buy interesting land. There's a huge opportunity for that, but they don't seem to want it at the minute, or maybe they're just not ready for it. Yeah.
Man. All right, Tom, so we're coming up on 2 hours, man, and I could literally talk to you for 5 more hours, and I'm going to spare you and Mark. So, I can't thank you enough. I am super excited to see the rest of the content that you release, and I'm excited to follow you for the rest of your career. I've been dying to watch you go to New Zealand. I need to see you in New Zealand. All the species of geckos and the diversity that they have with reptiles in general in New Zealand, I would arguably kill to see you go to New Zealand, dude. But
okay, right. It's noted.
Nonetheless,
and
is there any type of dude? I'll put a petition together to get them to send you there, man. It's just the unfortunate side of that is that a lot of those species aren't kept in captivity and they're overly protected. So it's always a bit challenging when I ask other herpetologists that I'm friendly with, why they don't do more New Zealand expeditions. And apparently it's pretty complicated. It's not simple to get over there, and they really protect their wildlife. And God bless them for it. But I would love to see someone with your skill set and mindset, someone as thorough as you, go to New Zealand just for educational purposes, just to, have this information about nature and species in this crazy world we live in. It would be amazing to have documentation on these things. Is there any announcements you have? Anything you want the public to know? Anything, read us your elevator pitch, where we can find you, how we can find your information, where to follow you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so Exotics Keeper is the platform. At Exotics Keeper on Instagram. Also website exoticskeeper.com. There's resources there. Couldn't have done any of this without Blue River, so blueriverdiets.com and at Blue River Diets. All of that's where you're going to get all the good stuff.
And we'll post all that in the description too.
Yeah, cool. And then in terms of announcements, we will hopefully have something pretty exciting to announce in the next couple of weeks, but we've just called it at the wrong sort of time now. So depending on when this goes out, maybe we'll have something to add to this.
Awesome. Very cool.
Real quick. 1 word answers. rapid fire. You ready?
Yeah.
Favorite new cow gecko?
Chihuahua.
All right. Most unexpected animal encounter?
Leechy on the floor.
Day gecko or night gecko?
Ooh, I can't. Day gecko. Day gecko. They're cool.
One item you never forget to pack again.
Flashlight.
Spare torch.
All right, that's it for me,
Thanks
man.
so much, guys. It's been great to talk to you.
Dude, it's a complete honor and a privilege, and I know I'm not the only one out here that views this information in this interview like this. I mean, this is priceless information. This is a priceless interview. This is an opportunity. I really don't even know what to say. I mean, to have a direct connection to someone who has had feet on the ground in a place that's, so directly tied to things that are literally in my heart and soul is just, I can't thank you enough. I mean, this is been an opportunity that I somehow I often ask myself how this even came to be and how this is possible, man. And I listen, I appreciate
you. Almost feel
Thomas.
like you were there with
you, man. I appreciate you.
If you ever have any questions or anything,
when you watch the videos, you do it. You're the way you film shows that you incorporate the viewer without them actually being there. You have a great way of making your content. It's very palatable. It's scientific without making people feel stupid. It's you do a great job with relaying your information. It's
well, thanks so much. It means a lot, and it's so nice to hear your kind words. It's all relatively new to me, this kind of presenting side of things, and I'm glad that passion shines through because it's something that I'm passionate about. So, thanks again.
You're doing a great job, man. Great job. And again, like
Amazing
I said,
job.
man, I'm beyond excited to watch what you do for the rest of your life. Like, I just want to see what's next, That's, again, awesome. Anything else you got to say, Mark? Anything else you want to say? Last closing points? Anything? Questions? Anything?
I mean, you've seen me. I've been in a daze at times just listening to you talk. I am very impressed. I wish you the best. I will follow you to the end. It's amazing to hear all of this stuff. I hope everybody learned something from this podcast. And I appreciate it greatly, man.
Right, yeah, thank you so much. Awesome.
It's
been great.
All right, guys. All the information, if anything we talked about or discussed, if you have any questions, Thomas is super cool about answering questions and responding. You guys can check him out on EK Magazine Instagram page. Any questions you have for us here at the podcast in regards to this episode, we're going to put as much and link as much information as I can in the descriptions with links to Thomas's Instagram page and EK Magazine's Instagram page, and you can get a visual of some of the stuff we're talking about. Follow them because there's plenty of content still to come. And again, guys, I mean, I am a huge advocate of replicating nature with these animals. And I know not everyone's the same, but if you want to understand your animals a little better, man, I mean, this is how you do it. Learn about their environment, check out where they come from. I mean, they
try different things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a tool to have in your toolbox, man. Another tool to have in your toolbox, and a more information to give you more options, and this is priceless information, guys. And don't forget to go by monsterbox.us and buy some of these enclosures, guys. I mean, come on. You want crested geckos, you want to keep them in something, you dress them up like little New Caledonian habitats and put geckos on them. All right, guys. I love you all, man. Appreciate every single one of you, man. And stay weird, guys. Guys, hang with me backstage. Don't go anywhere to make sure everything uploaded.